end of it.
I know. It's kind of comical.
All right. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. It is 7 p.m., and I call the June 23rd, 2025 School Board meeting to order. The Holmen Board of Education and the School District of Holmen acknowledge that our schools are located on the ancestral homelands of the Ho-Chunk, Sauk and Fox, and Dakota peoples. We celebrate and honor these lands and their sacred significance to Indigenous peoples. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Board Clerk Maggie Smith, would you please call the roll?
Maggie Smith here. Bridget Todd Robbins.
Here.
Barb Wunsch.
Here.
Abigail Holte.
Here.
Jennifer Deek.
Here.
Khadijah Islam. Here. Chris Lau.
Here.
Lindsay Need.
Here.
All right, with 7 of the 7 board members present, I declare a quorum. I note that the agenda has been posted, distributed, and sent to the local media. With this in mind, are there any changes to this agenda? I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as published.
So moved.
Chris has moved.
Second.
Khadijah has second to approve the agenda as published. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the agenda as published, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The motion to approve the published agenda has passed. And we do not have public participation this evening. So moving on to the district administrator's report. Dr. Mueller.
Yeah, I just have 2 things this evening, pretty quick. Well, one is not directly related to the district, but just wanted people to know that they're doing some work out on Briggs Road here, and so one of our high school exits is closed, so people are welcome to exit out other ways over directly onto McHugh Drive, and this will go on through Sunday this week. So we look forward to having Briggs Road redone and paved. So, and then our traditional summer school for elementary and middle school will start July 7th and go through July 24th. We currently have a few things already going on this summer in the district. We have some great intervention sessions going at our BGC club in our space there. In our ACE Academy space, our staff are doing interventions for elementary students within for their literacy. And then up at the high school, we have many students there really improving their physical well-being and health with the program. And they also have some high school classes going on now through the 27th. And then there'll be a second session at the high school July 8th through the 31st. So a lot of people think, it's summer. What's everyone going to do? There's time off when actually there's always lots of great things happening and going on. So thank you for everyone and all they're doing.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to recognition and thank yous. I invite Activities Directors Ben Tashner and Jason Luloff to present tonight's recognition of WIAA officials.
I kind of walk like now.
It's that time of year again when we come to thank our officials this spring. The weather was extremely kind to many of our officials as the cancellation numbers were relatively low. So we did actually experience a much more or a less chaotic spring than normal as far as reschedules go with officials, but the spring officials especially have a lot to deal with and handle in the tumultuous atmosphere of cancellations and reschedules, and we appreciate everything that they do, and we just wanted to take a moment to thank those that helped work our events this spring.
Yeah, and not only in the spring but all year. We appreciate them just reaching out and wanting to officiate the games for middle school and high school for those opportunities, but then always continuing to be flexible with us. And as always, definitely a shout out if there's anybody that's interested in becoming official, ask one of us and we can help you get that information.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to reports and discussion. Item 9.1, our school principals will now present to the 2025-26 student handbooks. This item will appear on the July 14th consent agenda.
Just go ladies. Elementary first.
Okay.
You go.
Is it out here? The clip. Oh. This one. It's on here. Okay. Let me speak to it.
It might not be on there.
Are all of them loaded on?
The board's been provided with all the handbooks and has
okay.
had a
All right.
chance to
Okay.
look them over
Yes,
and
good
and
deal.
read them. So if you could just give a brief overview of anything that's new or changed, that would be wonderful.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here representing the elementary team. We made minimal changes this year. A lot of it just had to do with kind of moving things around for better readability and more organization. But one of the big things that we did is that we included the information for our 4K program in our elementary handbook as well, too. So instead of being K through 5, our handbooks are now 4K through 5. Most of that information is on page 2 of our handbook, and then we made sure that we put in like a table as you're reading through it as well too, to have that 4K information kind of stand out from the rest of the K-5 information as well. Another thing that we added under student character is information about the student code of conduct and hyperlink for that as well too, so that way parents can see the different details in there. We added some new information about fundraisers. We did some revisions on safety drills and emergency response procedures. We updated the communication section, and then we made sure that the alignment of the handbook language was current with our district policies as well. And one big thing we wanted to say is that we want to really maintain, because we know it's important to stay consistent with our communication and be strong between the communication between home and school. So just a reminder for parents and for families and guardians that we have a Facebook page at our elementary levels as well as the newsletters as well too. So reach out so that way we can stay connected.
Ben Tashner, Associate Principal at the middle school. And so for our handbook, we also updated our code of conduct just to align that with the district so that we're consistent that way. And then all of our other updates are just kind of with other updates within the district, minimal changes through the middle school handbook, but then also just making sure that everything aligned with our policies in the district.
Ben Jorn from the high school. We had a couple small changes as well. We've added a minute to all of our classes, so our schedule's been updated. One of the bigger changes was found on page 30, so we've added some language to use handheld metal detectors. This would be in the case that we might need to search a student, but we don't want to be intrusive, trying to keep our schools safe and secure. So it's another layer that a lot of other of our sister schools and neighboring districts are already doing. So just to get in line with them.
And I just wanted to share a note of gratitude for all of the administrators who sat down at the table and the policy committee who looked at the code of conduct. It took us a little over a year. It was great work. We had a lot of really good conversations. This is our first time writing a new code of conduct, so we'll be revisiting that every year and making revisions as we go. But it was good work, and it is embedded within the handbooks for transparency to families. And then just also wanted to say a little bit about the handheld metal detectors. That is going to be, we have internal guidance for that. So it's not going to be used on a bunch of group of kids or, every day when kids walk in. That will be very intentional for specific situations. Just wanted to open it up if anyone has questions about that.
All right, any questions for any of them?
All right,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you. All right, moving on to item 9.2. Executive Director of Finance and Operations, Julie Holmen, will present for consideration on tonight's consent agenda, the fund balance designation.
Good evening. It's that time of year where we ask the board members to take action on designating the purpose of the financial resources in fund equity as of June 30th. The amounts contained are based on our best projection at this time and based on the fourth quarter revisions which are in process. It is a requirement to take action on these every year, a requirement of the Government Accounting Standards Board, Statement 54. reporting guidelines to estimate these year-end balances and to classify them into one of 5 categories. In your board materials, you also received an annual reminder of what is school district fund balance, so I'd just like to point that out also each year at this time. It is assets minus liabilities, so it's what the district owns minus what we owe as a district. It consists of cash, cash equivalents, investments, non-cash components, taxes receivable, payables, things like that. It's often confused as cash. It is not the equivalent of like a person's personal savings account or cash accounts. It's not entirely cash and cannot necessarily be used for any purpose. So financial reserves are only like cash reserves are only a portion of the fund balance. And so just a reminder also that it is a June 30th snapshot. So it's a best estimate of June 30th. And there are definitely things that we still owe and liability or receivables that we're still expecting from both the taxes and also state and federal government for reimbursements. So moving on with the designation of fund balance, there's 2 categories, spendable and non-spendable. And within the spendable category, the committed is the portion that is designated by the board, and the other ones have a little bit more flexibility. So in the general fund, we have $0 in non-spendable. We don't have a reservation for non-spendable fund balance. In restricted, we have about 1.2 million estimated, and that's our sinking fund balances that we have for several of our buildings. We draw on those specifically for facilities or technology, depending on how it was designated through an operational referendum in the past. The committed, which is a spendable category, but it's reserved through this process specifically for post-employment obligations to retirees. So based on eligibility in handbook for post-employment, HRA or longevity or sick leave payout, things like that. We reserve that annually with an estimate of what that might be this year. The assigned is reserved for payroll, benefit, and other payable obligations. We do this each year because we don't get our first state aid payment until September, and so we want to make sure that we're meeting those obligations throughout the summer, especially since a few years ago we gave educators the opportunity to choose either a 22 pay or 26 pay schedule. So we are paying probably 75% of our teachers through the end of August. I want to make sure that those funds are reserved for that purpose until our state aid starts coming in for the 25-26 year. And then the unassigned. And that last one is estimated at about 5.6 million. So the category breakdown is there in front of you. And then the total for Fund 10 is estimated at 15.9 million, almost 16 million, because we always talk about that as a percentage of expenditures in the general fund. That total is about 27.3 at this time. Next is the gift account. This is our fundraising, gift donations, and also scholarship reserves. As presented recently for third quarter, you're aware that we reconcile those throughout the summer after all the bills are paid for fundraising accounts. And so this actually represents the ending balance from last year, and that'll be updated based on the revenue and expenses within the gift accounts this past 12 months. Next is the debt service. That is restricted specifically for principal and interest due on our outstanding bonds and notes, and that is estimated at $5,360,000. Followed by Fund 40, which includes both Fund 42, our current capital projects, and Fund 46, the Long-Term Capital Improvement Trust Fund, at about 21.2 million. The breakdown is there on the right. Estimated Fund 42 is just over 20 million, and the Long-Term Capital Improvement Trust Fund at about $791,000. That fund was started 5 years ago. This is our 5th year. We have not drawn on that account at all based on the requirement to not touch it for 5 years. And so that's the total that has been put into that fund plus some interest earnings over the last 5 years. And next is Fund 50, or the school nutrition account. Estimated fund balance there for June 30th is $1,841,000. And for Fund 80 Community Service, which is our programs that we support at the Boys and Girls Club, estimated fund balance of $218,000 for a total, all funds included, estimated fund balance June 30th of $45.8 million. Any questions on fund balance designation for June 30?
Any questions? No questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, moving on to item 9.3. Executive Director of Instructional Services Kim Edwards will present the adopted school academic standards for approval on the July 14th consent agenda.
Good evening. It's that time of year again for annual notification of our academic standards. So by statute, we are required that the school board include this as an agenda item. The first meeting of the school year, so after July 1st, identified as stating the academic standards for the upcoming school year. So this report consent agenda item serves as formal notification that the School District of Holmen recommends the Board of Education's approval to adopt the following academic standards for the 2025-26 school year. The Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS, the National Health Education Standards, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, or the CASEL framework, and then the Wisconsin Academic Standards for all other areas. We also have these posted with more detail on the school district's curriculum and standards page under the instructional services. Any questions about that?
All right, any questions?
These are the same ones we had last year as well.
Okay, no questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Moving on to item 9.4, Kim Edwards will continue with presenting the dual academic program contract with UW Oshkosh. This item will appear on the July 14th consent agenda.
Okay, this is a, for your consideration, a renewal of our contract with UW Oshkosh in order to allow or to accept dual credit, where students would have the opportunity to earn credit on our campus with UW Oshkosh, as well as high school credit right here on our campus. Lindsay Sipe, who is the high school academic and career counselor, she and we present that every fall in greater detail with how many students are earning dual credit. This is one of those opportunities. This is an annually reviewed contract, and so approval would allow us to continue this opportunity for our students. Any questions on this one?
Any questions? No questions.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 9.5, Director of Safety and Student Services Jennifer Gimmer will present the postgraduate outcomes report. This item will not appear on a consent agenda.
Hi, everyone. As a reminder, I came this time last year to present post-grad outcomes and just talked about our academic and career planning. At that time, the software we were using to track our post-secondary outcomes was not ready yet. We have a brand new kind of software with National Clearinghouse we're using. So I'll be presenting on 2 different years' data. So I'll be jumping back and forth throughout it, as you'll see, to present on what should have been presented on last time. So I'll be going through first year enrollment, retention and persistence, grad outcomes, and then some conclusions drawn by the data. So first, going through first year enrollment trends, this information is coming from National Clearinghouse. So I'll indicate when it's coming from National Clearinghouse or our district survey that we give to our students. So when we look at National Clearinghouse in 22-23 graduates, 60% of students were enrolled within the first year. When we dive into those total, when you look at beyond just 60% of the students, when you look at all students, I think this is a highlight of Holmen. Out of 294 students, 283 had at least one post-secondary enrollment during or after high school, which is a huge celebration. So that would be taking sort of a college-obtained to a credit class. When we look at, though, the 175 students that were enrolled after high school, where they're going to, as you can see, majority are going to in-state with that 81%. A close between second year and 4-year school, not too much data between the two. This now is our school district survey, so this is left pretty much on their seat during graduation. We ask students to fill it out, so as you can see, like left blank, that's a student choosing not to write in their information. Just as another data source to compare where our students are heading off to. It closely aligns to what ends up being through National Clearinghouse, which is tied to their ID. So as you can see, that's pretty similar. One thing that is just important to note is that our vocational percentage did increase quite a bit from what students reported to what they ended up enrolling in, which I think is great to see.
Can I, but just before we go on, what's the difference between left blank and no response?
Yeah, I could not figure that out, but that's how it is read into the informational system.
Gotcha.
Some data pulling from just my groups, either students with disabilities or ML students. This is through the survey, not through National Clearinghouse. Unfortunately, National Clearinghouse doesn't let you discrete the data like that, which I think is a huge gap in the system. But looking through our local data is, I just want to point out, is both sample sizes are very small. So use that for caution. I always say that when we look at this. But majority of the students were split evenly. For students with disabilities, they're either seeking employment or going to a technology, no response or no plan indicated. ML sample is pretty small, unfortunately, but out of the students who did report their ML at the time, 66.7 were undecided and 33 were heading into training jobs. When we jump now to 23-24 graduating class, 56% of the students were enrolled within the first year. At least one post-secondary enrollment with and after graduating high school. When we look at all students, again, another highlight, out of 300 total students in that cohort year, 289 had at least one post-secondary enrollment during high school or within the first year of college, which I think is a huge celebration again. When we go back to those 168 that enrolled in college after graduating high school, again, you'll see majority chose to stay in state, but you'll see a difference here is that our 2-year public school has drastically increased when compared to our 4-year public school. So more students are going into that 2-year technical college or training. This is now our district survey that graduating students fill out. As you can see, it aligns closely to what students reported, but again, we continue to see an uptick of students who did not indicate they're going to a technical college, but ended up enrolling one afterwards, which is still great. Unfortunately, again, that left blank area or no response is still high. When you look at students with disabilities or ML students, again, a small sample size. A lot of students with disabilities, 31.4%, did not give a response, unfortunately. And only 8.6% of students with disabilities said they are pursuing a 4-year college. This is definitely not the same comparable to our total population. However, I do want to note that and I'll get to this at the end, we take other ways of monitoring our students with disabilities enrollment that Jill always presents on too, and it's drastically different than this. So that will be just something for me to discuss at the end too of how we're collecting data, because there's multiple sources of how we're collecting it and they're not aligning at this time. ML students is a small sample size, only 4 students indicated their ML, but 75% said they were going to go to college and 25 were undecided, which is a drastic change from the previous year. When we look at enrollment trends, our 4-year enrollment among students with disabilities was 33.3% and then dropped down to 8.6%. There's an increase in no response or no plan stated, which is how we're collecting our data. So that's just something as a district for us to consider, is our data collection a valid way to go about that when it's a significant blank. And then for ML students, majority were undecided. And then from the 23-24 school year, they planned on attending either a technical college or showing some improvement. But again, like I've shared before, the subgroups are very small, so I would interpret that with heavy caution. When you look at retention and persistence, once students are enrolled, and I'm going to go a couple years back because we want to look at trends here per se. In 21-22, 85% of our students retained at their cohort or transferred to another institution. In 22-23, similar number, 85% either retained or persisted. There's a slight increase over year persistent rates, particularly in four-year students. Students entering two-year and showed a slower persistence. It wasn't a significant amount, but it did decrease in the percentage. Also, our national trends show a very similar gap in retention between two and four-year programs, which aligns to our data, meaning we're not standing out in those either areas. When you look at grad outcomes, so this is now we track students once they enter the program, are they graduating within a 2 or 4 year or a longer earlier gap? So looking at 2019-20, 43% of students earned at least one credential or are considered a completer. So that is right on track because that would be year 3 into a college. So that's either vocational 2-year or they're finishing early in a 3-year program. When you look at 22-23, already 12% of students are considered a completer. And our 23-24 students, 8% are considered a completer. When you look at trends for grad outcomes, just something to note is Holmen's 5-year college completion rate was 43% and 28% of already earning a bachelor's degree or higher. And I think that attributes to of how many credits our students are going into college with from Holmen High School, which is a huge celebration like I shared in the beginning. As expected, completion rates are going to be lower due to shorting tracking time. That's pretty impressive to finish that quite early. Watch areas is just 46% in 22-23 and 45% of 23-24 are no longer enrolled after 1 year. So that's just something to note. It's unknown though, and I couldn't track deeper into National Clearinghouse or obviously our local data, is if students re-enrolled somewhere else or exited the higher education system in general. So just some conclusion points after looking at all that data. This is what stood out to me as I've kind of highlighted some things. Is Holmen continues to pursue a variety of post-secondary pathways with a strong enrollment in both 4-year and tech colleges, as long as offering a high amount of college courses or credits for our current high school students. Data suggests a need to focus on 2-year college supports and transition programming. Students with disabilities and ML students show an increase in post-secondary planning, but also continue to show gaps in clarity of equity of opportunity, and that is nationwide. That's not just a Holmen or a local data. Some next steps that I would suggest that our district continues to look at is strengthening transition planning supports, especially with students with IEPs, and I know that's always been a goal of ours. Expanding partnerships with local tech colleges and employments for work-based learning opportunities. I think this is a highlight of our district, but our ACP team, or post-secondary planning team, has been talking about this and wanting to target this. We also want to improve data tracking and follow-up systems to ensure every student's leave with clarity and support path, and align our data collection process. I kind of highlighted this before. We have to collect data through indicator 14, and that's individually calling students and families to collect that data. That is not aligning to that survey we hand out students at graduation. So just having a thought process as a district of what is best and how are we analyzing that data, and then also ensuring there's consistency in special education post-grads to make sure that we're not having any conflicted data points. Any questions?
I have one. Do you know for the 5-year college completion rate, do we know how that compares like to peer districts, or is there any comparison data?
Not
that we
in
have?
National
No.
Clearinghouse, no. They compare at a national level, just not as a local, like compared districts, yeah.
Probably less useful.
Yep.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. For the consent agenda, the board has been furnished with background materials on each item or has discussed it at a previous meeting. These will be acted upon with one vote without discussion. Would any board member like to pull an item out of the consent agenda to be discussed and or voted on separately? I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as provided.
So moved.
Motion by Chris,
Second.
second by Khadijah. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion passes. All right, moving on to the board debrief. I will call upon board members and ask you to present any comments or committee reports you have. And tonight, we'll start with Maggie.
Not a whole lot from me. Thank you to WIAA officials. Thanks to the folks who put all the legwork into the strategic plan we reviewed earlier today.
And then to the principals for their work on the handbooks.
Okay, Bridget?
Yeah, everything that Maggie said.
Okay. All right, Barb?
I have nothing additional tonight.
All right, Abigail?
I have just a recognition of all the students who went on their trips. I did mention this 2 weeks ago. However, they have returned now and are talking about it, posting about it. Good to see them home. And then, though that there's no school going on right now, it's kind of hard to connect with students in that way. I am looking at avenues to poll students because that was one of the things that I talked a lot about when I was campaigning, which I'm looking to sort of carry that and make that more of a tradition in this position. So looking for ways to reach out to students, make sure they know what's going on, and to get their opinion better.
Okay, Khadijah?
I don't have anything tonight.
All right, Chris?
I guess I'll piggyback off kind of what Abigail was talking about. We have a teacher in our district, Jackson Baumgartner, who's a 7th grade science teacher, and for the last 5 years, he's offered kids an opportunity to go on a trip down to Florida to do some science-based activities. My daughter was able to participate this year, and she had the time of her life, so I just wanted to give a huge shout-out to Jackson and his wife Emily for chaperoning that trip and making that available for our students. It's a real great opportunity for them. Like I said, my daughter had the time of her life, and I just wanted to say thank you to him.
All right, Lindsay?
Nothing further for me.
Okay, and I don't have anything further this evening either. All right, for our upcoming board meeting schedule, our next 2 board meetings will be on July 14th and July 28th at 7 p.m. And is there any other business that needs to come before the board at this time? If not, I would entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Is that Bridget?
Yes.
Bridget has moved. Chris has second to adjourn the meeting at 7:31 p.m. Motion carried. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed,